Hello guys and welcome to my new video, and there's been some crazy new information being released about patch 10.1, 10.7, about the new affixes or lack of new seasonal affixes, about the new dungeon pool, and there's so much to talk about it. So let's go and get started by looking at Mythic Plus in general. So we're gonna start off with the new dungeon rotation, or how they say the old dungeons coming back. And again, there wasn't any information released about the old dungeons, people were speculating. So season 2 is going to have all of these dungeons here mentioned. Keep in mind, season 2 starts at 10.1. 10.1 release date has not yet been confirmed, but most people are speculating between May and July, somewhere along those lines. So you still have some time to get those, push those Mythic Plus in season 1. But in season 2, some of the dungeons, some of them are like, they're so appreciated by the community. I think Freehold is going to stand out here because I think majority of people of the community, if you don't Freehold, will consider Freehold as one of the best dungeons. Because it is just such a fluid dungeon. It just feels really nice. You can do this dungeon over and over and over again and never get bored of it. At least that is my opinion on this. Arguably one of the best dungeons that they ever designed, in my opinion. Again, let me know how I feel about Freehold. Neltarian Slayer is coming back. I think this is a pretty nice dungeon. It is pretty scary, and certain trash packs are pretty scary with the rubble falling down and things like that. So again, I've done this dungeon a lot of times. I don't hate Neltarian Slayer. I think it can be pretty interesting. I think it can be pretty fun. And Underrot is coming back, which I actually really enjoyed. I thought Underrot was a really fun dungeon to do. Again, there is quite a bit of emphasis on things like disease dispels, poison, and things like that, which we'll talk about later on. And Vortex Pinnacle. Now, Vortex Pinnacle is something that I didn't play in Cataclysm because I skipped a lot of Cataclysm expansion, so I don't actually know what Vortex Pinnacle is going to be like in Mythic Plus. But if you did a lot of Vortex Pinnacle back in the day, let me know how you feel about this. Let me know how you would rank these dungeons. In my opinion, Freehold, Underrot, Neltarian Slayer, Vortex Pinnacle, probably in that order. These are banger dungeons coming back for season 2, and I'm really looking forward to. Now, on top of that, you're also getting back the dungeons, the Dragonflight dungeons, which I'm honestly, a lot of them, I'm very scared of. I'm very scared about Brackenhide Hollow to do with the disease dispel and how you're going to handle that. Even though you can be an alchemist and you can make it a little bit easier, I still think this dungeon is going to get nerfed 20 times before it's going to become viable for a lot of push groups and things like that. I don't really like Ultiman all that much. I like Neltaris. I think that's going to be pretty interesting. And I'm still kind of scared about Hall Infusion. So Season 2, let me know about these dungeons, but this is not the biggest information. This is not the biggest, surprise that I've seen, because we were expecting some good dungeons to come back in Season 2, because I think Blizzard wants you to have good experience in Mythic Plus. What does surprise me is the new seasonal affix or affix rotations that are going to happen in Season 2. They are removing seasonal affix completely. There's not going to be Thundering or any new seasonal affix introduced in Season 2. So straight away, you can consider that as a nerf to most of the dungeons out there. Because if you're someone who's doing a lot of these lower end keys, let's say plus 15s, plus 16s, plus 17s, I think a lot of times Thundering is a nuisance. I think a lot of times if a person doesn't know how to deal with Thundering, it can be really problematic. So the removal of the seasonal affix, like Thundering, is probably going to be, received as a positive thing. Now, I do consider, or in my personal opinion, I think the removal of seasonal affix, I don't know how to feel about this, because Blizzard has had some really nice seasonal affix in the past. I don't know if people remember Awakened, but Awakened was one of those affixes which, in terms of design of a dungeon, in terms of design of a seasonal affix, was pretty amazing, because it made old dungeons feel like brand new, because you would be encouraged to try different routes. And I think Blizzard has made some really interesting seasonal affixes, and they made some really bad seasonal affixes, like Infested, arguably the worst seasonal affix ever made, in my opinion. So how do I feel about the removal of seasonal affixes? I don't know. If Blizzard makes really good seasonal affix, I don't mind for that to be included in the next season. I don't hate a lot of the seasonal affixes. I think if Blizzard puts in a lot of effort into making something fun, I don't think they need to remove it. But on the flip side, if they make something really annoying, it can be something that's going to be extremely annoying for the rest of the season. Another huge change is to do that level 7 bucket affix refresh. Now, by refresh, I'm not 100% sure what they mean by it. Maybe they're going to change how the existing affixes work, or maybe they completely are going to introduce something new. And they're basically saying they're going to address these level 7 affixes: Quaking, Grievous, Volcanic, Storming, and Explosive. And they even mention here, you can see it here, we're really taking a closer look at level 7 bucket and how much opportunity is there for counterplay. How much of that is making your healer's life. They're literally pointing out the fact that most of the affixes are healer's job, and that is not a good thing. I for example, personally consider explosive to be an absolute... I don't want this video to be demonetized, but I don't like explosive because in high-end groups, it's 90% healer's job. I understand why it's healer's job, I understand why the DPS don't want to do it, I understand why it's better for the group that the healer does it, but I'm not paying 15 euro a month or whatever to play whack-a-mole. I don't like this at all. I always consider that explosive should have been removed or made kiss curse. Again, there's a lot of talk about that kiss curse affixes. Should explosive, for example, if you get the explosive orb, should that give you a DPS and healing boost? Should it be, how do I say, DPS, should they be incentivized in order to do more explosives? Again, they're also talking about things like quaking, which I don't really hate, but at the same time, when you think about quaking and thundering, you start to see why people really dislike quaking, because quaking can be one of those affixes where you basically ignore 90% of the dungeon, and then you get a really bad overlap, and all of a sudden you die because of that. Now, I know Blizzard is trying to fix those overlaps, but I think in terms of design and in terms of seasonal affix, quaking has been really, really poor. And then they're looking things like Grievous, again, healer's affix, majority of the time it's all healer's affix. Volcanic and Storming is something that doesn't really affect. I feel like most people won't hate Volcanic or Storming, maybe Storming for melee is a bit more awkward, but I think they're trying to make them a bit more interesting, a bit more involved in that dungeon, or how to say, Mythic plus affix pool. So guys, how do you feel about all of these changes that are proposed by Blizzard right now? There's a lot of talk because, again, the number one thing, no seasonal affix in Season 2, at least that is being proposed. They're reworking affixes in general, at least level 7 bucket. I think that is an indication that Blizzard is actually listening to a lot of those streamers and community. Like, they're listening to the feedback, because I was not expecting these affix changes this soon, because I think a lot of people were like, hey, maybe affixes need to be changed. We had these affixes for years and years and years. They're all the same. We're getting bored of these. They're not that great. Most of them are healers' jobs anyway. Most people probably assume that they're going to be changed like really later down the line, but I am pleasantly surprised that Blizzard is working towards these changes for patch 10.1, which is a lot sooner than I initially anticipated. I want to know, how do you feel about seasonal affix? Do you think they should remove it, or do you think they should add a seasonal affix and really spend a lot of time developing that seasonal affix so it feels fun and engaging towards the gameplay? I think I'm leaning towards that aspect a little bit more. And how do you feel about the affix reworks? Do you think more affixes should be changed? Things like bolstering, and again, let me know. But Blizzard also look at the whole concept of tyrannical and fortified keys. Maybe there shouldn't be such a big difference going from one week to another in terms of the difficulty of bosses or trash, and that is something that the community also has kind of complained about. And oh, I almost forgot, actually, there's a couple of things that I wanted to address in the affix section. Before I end the video, I really want to know, how do you think about the affix combinations that they're redoing in terms of healer mana? Do you think they should make affixes, or do you think they should make seasonal affixes that give mana to healers, because they did that in the past? They didn't do that in Dragonflight Season 1. Do you think healers having to drink or manage their mana during Mythic Plus runs, is that an aspect of healers gameplay that should continue, or should that be eliminated by an affix? That's something to consider, because again, sometimes, how do I say, slowing down the dungeon run because the healer has to drink might feel a little bit slow, but I'd love to hear your opinion on this. Another thing, do you think Blizzard should address the fact that in Mythic Plus making or group making, you always have to have that, how do I say, Balres, Bloodlust, things like that? Do you think those, or maybe even Shroud, do you think those class-defining utility abilities should, or how do I say, be included in any group? Maybe they should be something that you can press by default a couple of times in a Mythic Plus environment or something like that, or should they address that class utility a bit more? Because I know a lot of people out there are complaining about the fact that Preservation of Evoker has to be included because there's not that many Bloodlust classes that are meta in terms of DPS, again, enhancement shamans and things like that. So how do you get rid of these restrictions, or should you get rid of these restrictions? My personal opinion, I honestly don't know what they should do, because if they remove it, you're removing some class fantasy, especially things like Shroud from rogues. But on the other hand, I can see how things like Mistweaver monks feel when they're not getting invited over something like Preservation of Evoker because they don't bring Bloodlust. Again, a lot of discussion here. Let me know how you feel about all of these changes, and I'll see you in my next video.